What's up, guys? I hope you all are having a great day today. This is going to be a very interesting video, guys, because it's been a while since I've just straight up ranted about a video game I absolutely despise, and Hellblade 2 is next up on the chopping block. Now, I had the displeasure of playing Hellblade 2 in its entirety, just like the first game, in a 5-hour sitting on stream because of some wonderful donations from some absolutely amazing members of my chat. You know, shout out to FBI and U-Generation for the 500 to play this absolute masterpiece of a title. You know, big ups. I probably would have spent the money on something else if I were you, but, you know, here we are, and we are going to be talking about none other than Hellblade 2, and boy, do I have some thoughts, guys. Now, Hellblade 2 was originally announced back in 2019 at the Game Awards alongside the Xbox Series X, the quote-unquote world's most powerful console, as a graphical showcase title for Microsoft's new console that they were bringing to the market. And overall, Xbox fans have been kind of hyped for this game on some level ever since it was shown off, because it was a game that was designed to showcase the potential power of the Xbox console. And the original Hellblade, you know, despite my personal qualms with it, had an overall really, I guess, positive reception among most people. They thought it was a very innovative title, the way it used sound design, and it kind of presented a cool concept that kind of laid the foundation for maybe Ninja Theory to expand upon that concept in the future, whether that be a direct sequel or just a new game in general. It was kind of a cool concept that I think a lot of people were looking forward to seeing expanded, considering the fact that since Hellblade 1 had released, Microsoft had acquired them for a little over $100 million, expanded the studio from 20 to over 100 people, and because of this, they had the funding and resources to make a bigger and better game using everything they did right in Hellblade and expanding upon the stuff that maybe was lacking, like the gameplay and overall variety of puzzles and things to do within the game itself, because the original Hellblade, for all intents and purposes, was a walking simulator through and through. I don't think anybody is going to deny that whatsoever. Gameplay was definitely an afterthought when it came to that game, but Ninja Theory was a small studio at the time, and they were reportedly going through some financial issues as well, which is what led to Microsoft being able to purchase them for the price that they did. And well, fast forward to 2024, and the release of Hellblade 2 is upon us, so fans of the first game, as well as Xbox fans in general, we're looking forward to this true next generation title to release on the Xbox Series X, to not only finally show off the potential of the hardware they purchased a little over 3 years ago, but to actually see an improvement in Ninja Theory as a developer as a direct result of Microsoft's investment in the company, as well as the additional resources they provided. And well, I'm sorry to say that this game is not only just as bad as the first game, which personally I absolutely hated, it is somehow worse than the original, which I did not think was possible in all of the key areas that everyone was hoping the game would actually improve upon the second time around. Gameplay, the puzzles, and the overall interactivity with this game is at an all-time low, and it has become even more of a walking simulator, which basically will have you just pushing forward on your left joystick for 90% of this 5-hour game. So not only is Hellblade 2 pretty much the exact same thing as Hellblade 1, but it's actually worse in all the areas everyone was hoping for improvement, which, you know, it's not what I was hoping for going in, to put it lightly, because I was not a fan of the first game, and I did not have a lot of faith going into this one, and somehow it still managed to disappoint me, because it seems like Ninja Theory was completely unable to learn and adapt and take the feedback they received from the first game and actually improve upon the next iteration. They actually devolved with all the additional resources, with all the new people working on the game, and the expanded budget I'm sure that this game got. So overall, I think Hellblade 2 has safely earned, at least for me, the title of the worst game of 2024, because when it comes to being a video game, that is the thing that Hellblade 2 fails the most at. So let's go ahead and kick off this review with the positives first, because we need to get those out of the way, because we have a lot of negatives to get through, guys. So let's go ahead and get right into it.
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
Now, to address the elephant in the room, yes, this game looks absolutely beautiful. Now, I will add the caveat. At times, the background looks incredibly blurry. It seems like they have film grain, at least on the console version of the game, cranked up to the absolute max, and then multiplied by 10. And then on top of that, the black bars are fucking annoying. I hate them. They never felt normal to me, and I played the game all the way through in one sitting, so it's not even like I stopped, got up, came back to my screen, and then I noticed them again. I literally sat there, eyes locked on the screen the entire time, and the black bars were a complete eyesore throughout the entire game. And another thing that just is a weird design decision, which maybe this is a nitpick on my part, but the subtitles of this game would appear over top of the already small image that was cut off by the two black bars instead of just appearing inside of the black bars, which was a complete design oversight, I feel like, because it's like you already have this tiny little thin image that you're looking at, and then when you have the subtitles put on top of it, it just further obfuscates the view that you have of the game even further, which is definitely very vertically challenged at times. So it was a very weird design decision. Now, if you're listening to like the voices in your head, those subtitles will appear in the black bars, but any dialogue revolving around like actual NPCs in the game will appear over top of the already small and thin image that you're left with because of the aspect ratio that the devs chose to go with in order to give a more cinematic feel, or in my opinion, to make the game less intensive on hardware when it's being rendered, because you don't have to render those portions of the screen. So that's what I think was really going on personally. But anyway, I hated the black bars. The film grain was absolutely awful in this game, and a lot of times things would just get really blurry. Like if you used photo mode and zoomed in on anything past the initial like viewpoint that you had when you hit the photo mode button, it looked horrible. So there's definitely some visual jank that they have in there that obviously probably is a result of them pushing the graphics that hard, especially on console. So that's a little forgivable in my opinion, but I don't think anyone being genuine is going to say that this is an ugly game by any means. This game looks absolutely beautiful, and they knocked it out of the park in the tech demo aspect of it when it comes to showing off the power of Unreal Engine 5 on consoles and PC hardware. So in that particular instance, the game excels at what I believe is its true intention, which is to be a graphical showcase title. For the Xbox, unfortunately, Ninja Theory just didn't bother to make a great game to go along with those great graphics, and that is the greatest downfall of Hellblade, but the game is beautiful nonetheless. Now, I think this goes without saying, the sound design in Hellblade 2 is very well done, especially if you can get past the obnoxious schizo voices constantly whispering in your ear. That to me is incredibly grating and makes me pissed off very quickly. I don't enjoy that aspect of the game whatsoever, but the sound design, even with that, is incredibly well done. It's very immersive. The 3D elements of the audio just sound really cool, and it's definitely a game you want to experience with headphones like Ninja Theory recommends. So once again, I don't think anybody is going to have anything but glowing praise to say about the sound design of this game. And just to add on top of that, the acting in this game was really well done. The actress who plays Senua, the main character of the game, I feel like she does a very good job. The facial animations and expressions on her face match the tone of her voice perfectly, and overall, I don't have anything but positive things to say about that in that aspect. I think she did a really good job in the role, and Ninja Theory definitely nailed that aspect of the game, which is very important for a movie-type game like this, where the main focus is definitely on the characters, and there's a lot of close-up facial shots of them, which means the facial animations and believable voice acting is all the more important. So that is definitely something worth praising in my opinion. Now, I do want to touch on one positive thing surrounding the gameplay of this game that I actually did like a little bit better in this particular instance compared to the first game. Now, when I say this is a small gameplay element, and overall I'm still negative on this element, but there is something worth pointing out. Now, I think the puzzle variety was a step in the right direction. Now, don't get me wrong, these puzzles are not even puzzles in my opinion. They are brain dead easy, and more so hide and go seek in a lot of cases. Like, they're not really anything that involve a lot of thought, let's just put it that way, but they are a massive improvement over the copy and paste line up the rune format of the original game. So there's actually some variety this time around. So I did want to give them a little bit of credit in that regard, because it did not feel like you were doing the same puzzle 50 times over by the end of the game. Now, the puzzles do feel a little bit repetitive in each particular category because you do them all back to back to back. They're not mixed up in between, which I think is kind of odd, but overall, I think the variety of puzzles was a step in the right direction. Unfortunately, the quality of those puzzles is an entirely entirely different topic altogether, as well as just how brain dead easy they were, and basically were just set up to stall gameplay progress. But anyway, we will get into that when we get to the negatives, so I think we should probably just go ahead and move on over to those.
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
Alright, so for me, I feel like the biggest negative of Hellblade 2 is definitely the gameplay. This is a glorified 5-hour tech demo or walking simulator, whatever you want to call it. This game is hardly even qualifying as a game in my opinion, and the amount of user input that actually fucking matters is humorously low. And one of the biggest things I find comical about Hellblade 2 is they are constantly stressing this theme about choice, determining who you are as a person and breaking free of fate and all this other type of stuff. Basically, player choice, for lack of a better term, is the key theme surrounding Hellblade 2.
Her story is not written. There is always a choice.
Which is ironic because at no point in this game is the player ever presented with any sort of choice or any sort of variability whatsoever when it comes to tackling this game. This is a game that if you watch someone play it and then you play it yourself, you will have a damn near identical experience, down to the very combat animations you're witnessing in subsequent order if you play the game as intended. I mean, this game is basically on rails. Like, the way I would best describe it is a third-person adventure game developed like a racing game on a linear track, and once you get further down the track, you're not able to go backwards, you're not allowed to go to the left or the right, and you can only progress forward through the immediate route presented in front of you. You are not able to explore, look around, or do anything the game does not intend you to do exactly. And that's what I feel like the biggest flaw of Hellblade 2 is it feels like nothing you do actually matters for any part of the game whatsoever. You fight the exact same enemies in the exact same order every single time you play the game. You use the exact same weapon with the exact same attacks and the exact same counter moves throughout the entire game. There is nothing that changes whatsoever. You have to do puzzles in a particular order. Like, for example, there's a puzzle that revolves around collecting 3 orbs around the room and placing them in a center pedestal. Well, you have to do those orbs in the exact order the game wants you to. You can't start one, do like the third one, and then do the second. It has to be done in 1, 2, 3 order. There is no variability whatsoever, and that basically goes for all the puzzles in the game. And that is just a very common theme that you'll notice while playing Hellblade 2. It feels like a racing game in the sense that you have a linear path. It looks beautiful, the graphics are absolutely amazing, but try to veer off course and the game will course correct you and limit your actions at every given opportunity. I mean, it's at the point where basically you could watch a no commentary gameplay walkthrough of this game and you would get the exact same experience if you're wearing a good pair of headphones as you would playing this game. In fact, you'll probably enjoy it more because the combat and puzzles are mundane and boring to do anyway, so you're not even really having fun doing anything in this game, and pressing forward on the thumbstick for the rest of the 90% of the time you're playing it is not exactly what I would call engaging at all. At least if you have your hands free, you can like scroll on your phone or something while you're watching it in the background and listening to the voices in your head. But overall, man, I just don't really see how this game has any sort of replayability whatsoever because of this design decision. I mean, it is literally just borderlining on an on-rails experience to the highest degree. This takes walking simulator to a next level. Like games like Telltale games and Life is Strange and other games like Detroit Become Human, which are basically glorified walking simulators as well, they actually have variability in the experience where your decisions actually change the outcome of the story and the events that unfold subsequently. Take all the variability out of a fucking Telltale game, and what are you left with? You're basically left with a TV show with boring fucking gameplay in between. That is literally Hellblade 2, and that is why I don't even qualify this game as an actual video game. It is an audio-visual tech demo at its core, and they forgot to add the video game aspect that video games actually require. So, for that reason alone, I wouldn't recommend buying this game. Now, that is only one issue with the gameplay. I mentioned the combat is not great either, and it's actually a downgrade from the original game, if you can believe that is even possible, because the original Hellblade had some of the most brain-dead, boring, and just simplistic melee combat found in any game I have ever seen in the genre, which is kind of crazy considering that this is the studio that brought us Enslaved, Heavenly Sword, as well as DMC Devil May Cry. So they have experience working in the hack and slash or action game genre, so it makes no sense why the gameplay was such an afterthought in this game for them when they already have that pedigree within the industry. And I know, say what you will about DMC Devil May Cry, at least the gameplay was actually fun in my opinion. You know, say what you will about the story, I agree it was very fucking cringe, but the game itself I enjoyed from a gameplay perspective. But Hellblade 1, man, was just very boring. You didn't look forward to combat encounters, in fact you kind of dreaded them, and that's definitely the case in Hellblade 2 because they made the combat even more simplistic and even more boring. You actually feel a lot less powerful this time around because a lot of your gameplay options have just been straight up removed, and overall I didn't really have fun playing this game whatsoever. I was just ready for combat encounters to be over because they're extremely linear. You don't have any actual input in which enemy you fight first. They just come at you one-on-one in like a continuous chain with various animations in between kind of flowing the combat together, and it's the exact same experience for everyone. So again, it's not really going to help with the replay value when you're seeing the exact same combat animations and the exact same encounters in the exact same order over and over and over again, depending on which enemy type you're fighting. So combat in this game is an absolute slog. Enemies feel spongy as fuck. It takes like 20 hits to kill one enemy in a lot of cases, which is absolutely wild, dude. You're swinging a sword, and in some cases it feels like you should have chopped the guy's arm off by now, and his arm, if it was even still hanging on, would literally just be a fucking skeleton. But no, they're still not dead. You're still just hacking away at them methodically, and eventually you're finally able to kill them. So the combat in this game is an absolute slog. It's not fun. It's overly simplistic. And another thing too that's irritating is when you're playing the game, because of the camera angle, if an attack is coming from your left, you can't fucking see it because Senua's body is blocking the weapon, so you're unable to time your parry or dodge properly in order to either dodge or deflect the attack and then counter. So the game just, I don't know, man. It is such an obvious example of gameplay being the absolute last thing thought about when it comes to the development process of this game. Nothing about it is good. It is incredibly generic, and this is some combat you probably would have expected to see with something like the 3D brawler minigame in the original Final Fantasy VII. That's how simplistic this shit is. And on top of that, the one unique aspect of Hellblade 1's gameplay where the voices would alert you to whether or not an enemy was attacking you from behind, to your right, or to your left, or in front of you, that has been completely removed from the game now because you're only fighting enemies one-on-one this time. So the one unique gameplay element that Hellblade had going for it in its combat has been completely stripped from the fucking game, dude. Like, I don't get what the fuck happened here. Like, they're stripping the game of its very identity and making the combat even fucking worse than the original. And don't get me wrong, the original game by no stretch of the imagination had good combat, but somehow they managed to make it worse in an iterative update to the franchise. Like, that is absolutely incredible. It's been 7 years since Hellblade 1 release, and they found a way to make the combat encounters worse in this particular game. That should actually be applauded, man, because that takes some serious skill. But overall, the combat is an absolute joke this time around, and the fact that gameplay just was completely neglected to this extent in creating the sequel is really just disgusting in my opinion, because already it was already taking a backseat in the original, but to further throw it to the side and neglect it is just obnoxious in my personal opinion, and it shows the developers do not have their priorities in the right place whatsoever. And once again, the game suffered because they were too busy prioritizing the visual fidelity instead of the actual experience that you have while playing the game. Now, another gameplay element I do want to touch on here is the puzzles again. Now, they did have better variety this time around, like I mentioned previously, but the puzzles are absolutely horrible. They solely exist to stall your progress and break up the monotony of holding forward on the left stick in order to walk down the next hallway, essentially, when they're not sprinkling in combat encounters, which are actually very rare in this game. But puzzles are just as rare, believe it or not. There are a lot of segments of this game where you will just walk in a straight line for 20 to 30 minutes in a lot of cases. But the the puzzles that are there are brain dead easy. They are much easier than the first game, which you might see as a positive or negative thing, considering that you're not going to waste a lot of time trying to figure them out, or, you know, basically try and find the exact right point on the map to stand in order to line up the runes. It's a lot easier this time around, which I did like that, in all honesty, because I just wanted to get through the game as quickly as possible because I wasn't really having a great time. But it would have been nice if there was actually like some mechanically challenging puzzles that actually made you think, but instead you can basically just get through all of these by process of elimination. It is not hard whatsoever. There's maybe one or two moving parts you'll have to mess with in order to tackle the more difficult ones, which I say that very lightly, but yeah, overall puzzles brain dead easy. They're all basically the exact same premise, which is, you know, you need to interact with various objects in the environment. All of them are pretty similar in nature, but given the, I guess, variety of different objectives, it does kind of make it feel like you are doing different activities. But the problem arises is you'll have to do the find 3 ball activity 3 times in a row. You'll have to do find the runes 3 times in a row. Or there's an entire segment towards the middle of the game where it's like an hour and a half and you're in this cave system, which feels like forever. And the entire time you're just going from room to room, lighting torches over and over and over again with 0 combat encounters whatsoever interrupting that. So it can get very monotonous at times still. So that's why I said it's a minor positive that there's more variety this time around, because overwhelmingly these puzzles are still a negative aspect of the game and honestly just serve to slow down your progression of holding down the left stick forward to the next combat encounter. So I don't know, man. It just, again, it feels half-assed. It feels like gameplay and all of the different ways you interact with the environment and with the game itself were a afterthought at best, because what is important here is the visual fidelity and the sound design and just the flashy surface level aspects of the game, which is very unfortunate because it does not lead to a good gameplay experience. And when the sequel turns out worse than the original in terms of the one feature they really needed to improve on, it's not really a good indicator that the studio has their priorities in the right place. So that's enough about the gameplay. Really nothing to say positive there, but let's go ahead and move on to the story.
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
Now, the best way I can describe the story of Hellblade 2 is take a movie, for example. And no, I'm not talking about Hellblade 2. It's a cult classic. It's beloved by everyone. It does something new and different that hasn't been done in the film industry before, but the director has no interest in making a follow-up movie or a sequel to it because he just wants the work to stand alone as it is. But the greedy movie studios that own the IP decide, you know what? We don't need him. We're going to hire a different director to come in and make a sequel. So this director, not really having the same insight that the original director had, decides to make a sequel the best he can, imitating what he believes is the appeal of the original work. And well, it turns out he completely missed the point entirely and made a story that feels like something familiar to what people liked originally, but just doesn't really capture the same essence or impact that the original work had the first time around. And that is the absolute best way I can sum up the story of Hellblade 2. This is a game story that feels like an unnecessary Hollywood sequel, which I know it's ironic considering the fact that I've been comparing this to a movie, but just bear with me here. I think it's a very good analogy because the story of Hellblade 2 just feels very weird. Like they're still trying to go for this whole aspect of, you know, Senua being under the influence of the voices in her head, but at the same time, she can better control them, but then at certain moments, they take hold. Like, it's very weird. It doesn't play the same and work as well as the original did. I mean, I wasn't really a fan of what they did in the original game, but I understand what they were going for. I can appreciate the intent behind what they were doing with the original game, and I don't think it lands in this one whatsoever at all. Now, the story of Hellblade 2, which I'm not going to get into exact details or any sort of deep spoilers or a plot synopsis here or anything like that, but basically, the story revolves around Senua going to free, I guess, her villagers or whatever that have been captured by Norse raiders in Iceland, and she has been captured and put on a slave ship.
Beating and finding, taking us as slaves. These Northmen sail under a blood-red sign. And one among them they call Master.
They wouldn't be jokes like this Khazar baby. They wouldn't be jokes like this cat crying over some Holocaust. The real Holocaust is on these slave ships. That's right!
And basically the entire game revolves around her finding her captors and stopping the practice of slavery in the region. You know, the breaker of chains, girl boss story from Game of Thrones, basically. But it slowly devolves into a supernatural tale about how the giants are actually behind it, and the Norse raiders are being forced to capture slaves in order to sacrifice, in order to keep their own people protected. I mean, I'm not going to get into the whole details. If you want to play the game, it's only 4 hours, or you could just watch it on YouTube, whatever. You're not really in for a great story, I feel like. It's serviceable, but it really tries to just harken back to the original themes of the first game, which feels really just unnecessary because the first game already had kind of a suitable conclusion where Senua came to grasp with the fact that, you know, she is a conflicted person in her head and she needed to come to the realization that she needed to accept loss and move on. That was kind of the whole theme of the original Hellblade. It was about her basically descent into madness and eventual, you know, recovery, or I guess road to recovery, you could say, because she's still fucked up in the head in this game. But it just felt really unnecessary, man, because, you know, they're constantly trying to bring back that shit from the first game, but it's like, didn't this already kind of get resolved and now it's kind of like a superpower to her? It's very weird, especially considering the fact that her society originally shunned her for having this mental problem. Now she's being embraced for it, and it's like some supernatural power. It's very weird, and it just feels like unnecessary sequel type energy, if you ask me, which you can agree to disagree if you want. Play the game for yourself, watch it, let me know what you think, but the story does absolutely nothing here. It did not hold my attention. I was not interested whatsoever, and the game throws a bunch of characters at you that you're supposed to care about with almost no actual backstory or information or any real reason to give a fuck about them. I mean, it's just very weird. The game feels incredibly rushed. They just try to shoehorn all this weird story shit into the game that just feels really out of place. And they kind of go into Senua's origin a little bit at the very end, which I guess is kind of cool. They do set it up for a sequel, you can obviously tell, but overall, I don't think the story is anything to write home about. It's serviceable. Again, it feels like this is another aspect of the game that suffered as a result of them pursuing this quest of graphical fidelity in order to create a technical showcase title for the Xbox Series X, which probably should have come out around the launch of the console instead of 4 years into the cycle. You know, I guess something like an Order 1886 or Rise Son of Rome, which originally came out towards the beginning of the Xbox One and PS4 generation, which were titles used to showcase the graphical fidelity of the console, while not exactly prioritizing gameplay. But Hellblade 2, by comparison to the Order 1886 and Rise Son of Rome, make those games look like, you know, Devil May Cry 5, in my opinion, when it comes to gameplay. So that's how just neglected a lot of aspects in this game were in order to pursue that graphical quest, in my opinion. But yeah, the story's nothing really to write home about. None of the characters aside from Senua are really that memorable at all, and you're not really going to have any sort of attachment to them because you're not really given a reason to. So I feel like that is an absolute failure on the part of the storytellers at Ninja Theory, not necessarily the actors that portray them or anything like that. They all do a serviceable job, but they can only work with what they're given, and what they were given here was nothing to write home about in the slightest. Now, the best way I can wrap up the story in this game is it's just incredibly pretentious, it's extremely convoluted, purposely abstract, and just overall has that really artsy feel that's designed to basically, you know, pretend like the game is much more intellectually stimulating than it actually is, and a lot of times it just comes off as very pompous and annoying, and it does not lead to a very fun gameplay experience or experience in general. So I don't know, I feel like the story in this particular situation is an absolute miss, but you know, feel free to disagree with me in the comment section below. I definitely feel like this review is already going to be pretty contentious, so you know, feel free to sound off. But I do want to touch on one last aspect again, just to give it like its own kind of category, because I do feel like it's very important for these very short story-driven games, and that is replayability.
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
Prior to playing Hellblade 2, I actually played through Vanquish, an old game from Saga from 2010, which is about 4 to 5 hours long as well, but from beginning to end, the game is absolute non-stop action combat that is just incredibly fun, fast-paced, and will just keep you on the edge of your seat the entire time, and as soon as you're done with the game, you can't wait to jump back in and replay it, knowing what you figured out on your first playthrough. Well, in the case of Hellblade 2, it is literally the polar opposite. I see very little reason to even contemplate replaying this game, considering the fact that everything surrounding it is so linear in nature and just monotonous and boring. The only thing the game offers in terms of replayability is you have the option to go through the game again with different narrators, aka the voices in your head, which personally I didn't do because I have zero interest in doing it, but again, you could probably just listen to somebody's playthrough on YouTube at that point, but that's really all it offers, because you're going to have the same weapons, you're going to have the same attacks, you're going to have to do the exact same puzzles, you're going to have to fight the exact same enemies, you're going to have to walk down the exact same hallways, and there's no variability to any of those experiences whatsoever, so it's not like you can pick a different play style, or use a different weapon, or tackle puzzles in a different order, or use what you learn to your advantage throughout your playthrough, because nothing changes throughout it. So even with that added element of the different narrators giving you more context surrounding the plot, I don't really think the plot is really anything that interesting that's going to warrant an entire new playthrough of this game, considering just how boring it is to play the first time. But I guess if you're really immersed in the story and interested in the lore and, you know, I guess enjoyed the game the first time around, that is there if you're interested. But personally, I don't see myself ever touching this game again, God willing. So personally, I think the replayability is non-existent for this game. In fact, the original playability for this game is almost non-existent in my mind, and I would recommend you just skip it altogether and spend your time doing pretty much literally anything else in the first place. But that is going to wrap it up for the major negatives I have surrounding this game, and I feel like I've touched on everything I really want to talk about. So let's go ahead and move on over to the conclusion of this review.
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
Now, if I were to describe Hellblade 2 in one sentence, it would be Hellblade 2 is everything I hate about the modern video game industry personified. Hellblade 2 prioritizes style over substance and completely neglects the most important thing that makes a video game, and that, of course, is the actual gameplay. We play video games to experience them through a controller and actually take part in the events that we're watching unfold on screen. When you have a game like Hellblade 2, which basically takes you out of the driver's seat for 90+% of the game's 5-hour runtime, you have a complete disconnect with the player, and it basically leaves them wondering, why didn't you just make an animated movie? Why didn't you just make an in-engine rendered cutscene and release it on Netflix or something like that? Or, you know, charge people $10 to download it or something. Like, I don't know, man. This feels like a game made by people who would rather be making a movie instead. I think it's very evident with the obsessive amount of facial capture detail and voice acting work and animation and choreography and everything that went into it that the people making Hellblade would much rather be making a movie than an actual video game, and did everything in their effort to make this game feel like a movie instead of what it should have been, which is a gameplay experience with a story and those storytelling elements on top of a solid gameplay experience that should be the foundation of every game made. Period. Because video games are meant to be played. They are not meant to be watched. Otherwise, developers could just release cutscenes online and there would be no need to develop actual gameplay segments in these games. And Hellblade is the prime example of a game that completely forgot that it needed to commit to creating a compelling gameplay experience first for the player to draw them in and keep them engaged with the story they were trying to tell. It's the biggest area that Hellblade 1 needed to improve on, and to see them actually down downgrade that experience in the second game is very concerning in my mind and does not really bode well for any future projects that Ninja Theory works on. It is not surprising to me that games journalists are eating this shit up and absolutely love this game because, you know, anything that has less gameplay, the better in their mind. They would rather watch a game than play it. It seems to be the trend in the modern Western video game market, but overall, man, if I had to give this game a rating, I'm giving it a 3 out of 10. This is a game that is well below average from a gameplay perspective and an overall gaming experience because I'm not reviewing a movie, I'm not reviewing a TV show, I'm reviewing a video game here. And as a video game, Hellblade fails in just about every single aspect imaginable, so therefore, I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 10. I think the sound design is great, the graphics are top of the industry, you know, the storytelling's okay, the character voice acting work is well done, but that is not enough to carry a game when a game is meant to be played first and foremost. So for that reason, 3 out of 10, I would avoid this game like you would avoid a, I don't know, psychotic Viking bitch swinging a sword. You know, is that a good analogy? But overall, there's so many better ways to spend your time playing video games. Even if you can get this for free in Game Pass, I still would say pass on it, man. This is just a perfect example of everything wrong with the modern gaming industry. This obsession with photorealism, dialogue, cutscenes, storytelling, and just completely leaving gameplay out in the fucking cold. It's really obnoxious, and it seems to be an ever-increasing trend in the Western video game industry. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, you just don't like single-player games, dude. You just play Call of Duty and multiplayer and action games. You don't like stories. Well, keep in mind this, okay, guys? My favorite game I think I have played probably in the past decade is either Final Fantasy 15 or Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth. And what are those games? Incredibly heavy on the story. They're JRPGs. The story is right up there with gameplay in terms of importance, and I think it's all about finding a balance. When it comes to making a video game that heavily emphasizes story, there needs to be still that focus on the gameplay experience to break up the monotony of sitting through all that dialogue, all those cutscenes, all those walk and talk segments. There has to be something that allows you to take a break and take control and have fun. My favorite thing about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is the character building, believe it or not. My favorite thing is not the gameplay, but the gameplay is absolutely fantastic for what it is because, for example, you might have a 20-minute segment of talking and dialogue and story development, but then you're dropped into a 45-minute long boss fight. I mean, the game just gives you so much gameplay as well as so much story and character development and lore and everything surrounding it that it finds that perfect balance. And Hellblade 2 really had the opportunity to find that balance between being a narrative-driven experience but also providing a great gameplay experience on top of that. For as much shit as I give Sony's games, they've actually managed to strike a pretty good balance with some of those. Now, recent examples like God of Snore Ragnarok and Spider-Mid 2, I think were way more movie than they were game and definitely suffered for it. But games like Days Gone, games like Ghost of Tsushima, games like God of War 2018, I think really managed to find that balance well and succeeded in this particular genre. So it's a very hard thing to balance, but if developers get it right or at least take steps in order to reach that goal of finding the perfect balance, I think that's an encouraging sign. But in the case of Hellblade 2, it is a regression from the original, and I think that speaks volumes to Ninja Theory's future endeavors in the video game industry and why I think this game is just an absolute sign of the times for a lot of Western game devs in terms of this pursuit of being wannabe filmmakers. But anyway, guys, rant over. Let me know your thoughts on Hellblade 2 in the comments section below. Are you enjoying it? Are you hating it? Always interested to hear y'all's take on this particular topic. I'm sure it is going to be a fun comment section on this video, but if you did enjoy the video, make sure to hit the like button. I would greatly appreciate it. And as always, I do want to thank you all so much for taking the time out of your day to check out this video and for all the recent support as well. You guys are the fucking best, and I really do appreciate it. So with that shit said, guys, I will catch you guys next time.